And we're back once again with David Miscavige. I'm going to let you get to the point you want to get to, but I was astonished during the break you told me you had never heard that tape before.
No, I've never heard that tape.
L. Ron Hubbard tape.
No, I'm not. I mean, it may exist there, but I haven't heard it. I mean, I don't know if you understand. There are 6,000 lectures by Mr. Hubbard. There are over 20 million words of printed words in Scientology, and all of these have been made available in Scientology. So if it is there, we'll find it. I don't think anything's being hidden either. I just personally haven't heard that tape. Okay. No.
Now, you wanted to get back to the issue of the psychiatrists, yes. and let me, if I may, by way of introduction to that, I did not interrupt you before, but you were talking about the use of psychiatry in Nazi Germany, the use of psychiatry in the Soviet Union.
Yes.
I would argue, and I think most psychiatrists in this country would argue, that what we're talking about here was the misuse of psychiatry in both those countries.
Well, okay, and if we're talking about the misuse, fine. In any event, I think any use that ends up killing people is a misuse, and I think that's a hell of a record to have. But let me get back to where I was, because it does tie in. You say the misuse, but I don't know if you're aware that there was a plan in 1955 in this country, Ted, to repeat what was done in Russia. There was going to be a Siberia, USA set up on 1 million acres in Alaska to send mental patients. They were going to lessen the commitment laws. You could basically get into an argument with somebody and be sent up there. This sounds very odd. Nobody's ever heard about it. That's in no small part thanks to the Church of Scientology. I must say, though, when that bill was killed in Congress, the war was on with psychiatry, where they declared war on us. And I want you to understand something.
Let me just ask you to be specific on that. You were talking about a bill having been brought into Congress for the setting aside of 1 million acres in Alaska.
You got it.
For people...
Send mental health patients.
Mental health patients. Who was the sponsor of that bill? What was the bill number? I mean, I'm sure we're going to...
Well, I have a copy of it, and if you want it, I can give it to you. All of these documents were made available to Forrest. If they're not on here, I don't know why, but I do have them, and I will make it available to you.
Was that bill ever voted on? Did it ever come out of committee?
Oh, yes. It was a major flap for the psychiatrists when it got voted down. Because then the slogan around the country began Siberia, USA, and it was really the first time that psychiatry had been denigrated publicly, that they weren't the science that they had been promoting themselves to be. And they took it upon themselves then to start dealing with anybody who would oppose them. They definitely saw Dianetics and Scientology as opposing them, not only in terms of their brutal treatments, such as electric shock and prefrontal lobotomy, which are specific things that we're against, but also for the fact of the people that were going to Dianetics and Scientology and not there. They went to the Food and Drug Administration. They went to the American Medical Association. They arranged an informant to go into our headquarters here in Washington, D.C., and infiltrate the organization over the next 5 years. I have documents on this, too. They wanted to get somebody in the church to recommend medical treatment. Couldn't get them to do it. Walk in and say, I want to be cured medically. People wouldn't do it. They finally went so far as getting the head of the D.C. the moral department of the D.C. police to send his daughter in as an informant, pregnant, to get an abortion, to ask the church to do it. A frame job. The church didn't go for it. They did then raid the church.
When you say they, you're talking about who now?
I'm talking, this is the APA, AMA, Food and Drug Administration. These people were all coordinated doing these activities, and it went on for 5 years, Ted. And you have to understand, we only find this out recently. They then proceed to raid our church. Now, the following takes place. They killed one of our executive directors. They literally murdered. The Food and Drug Administration hired an informant to go into our organization in Seattle, Washington. His wife was there. He wasn't for Scientology. She was. They said, great, report on her and report on Scientology. He proceeded to do so. Several weeks later, murdered the head of our organization. Food and Drug Administration never told us that it was their informant. Instead, they got with with the Seattle police and went undercover in the organization on the homicide investigation to rifle our files. At that same time, and here's where the media comes in, a man interviewed L. Ron Hubbard for the Saturday Evening Post, came out with an unbelievably bad article in that magazine. Of course, Scientology said, you're part of this Food and Drug Administration thing, and of course he said, oh, excuse me, you just sound like the fringe, which is very easy to say. What do I find out 20 years later through the Freedom of Information Act? I find out that this man, a man named James Phelan, the Saturday Evening Post had been written to by the Food and Drug Administration to get a discrediting article written on Mr. Hubbard and Scientology to help their case against us. That this man then went and interviewed Mr. Hubbard. He interviewed him for 2 days. Mr. Hubbard provided him with tapes and transcripts. The man came back here to the United States. Mr. Hubbard was in England and provided those transcripts to the Food and Drug Administration for their case a full week before he ever wrote his article.
We have got to take another break. We'll continue our discussion in a moment.